new series. It's called Beyond Conversations, Beyond Business Conversations. And today I have Jenev with me, and she is a relationship expert for entrepreneurs. So I'm really excited to have her with me. You know, sometimes we think about building business, it's all about building business, the marketing, and the making money part, and then we forget the most important part, which is relationships. Because as they say, you know, you take a village to build no, you take a village to raise a child. In the same way as a woman, as a man, whatever you want to do to pursue your dreams, you do need a village to help you and support you as well. And so, if you have never met me, or if you're new to my work, I basically help spiritual entrepreneurs craft out their marketing message so that they can get their message out there in a much bigger way, and they can make good money consistently to live the rich life. So it's not just about making money, it's about the process to get there, and it has to bring you lots of joy. And you know, as a woman, as a man, if your relationship falls apart, then you know it just crumbles down. And I'm so happy and honored to have my friend with me, and let me pass the torch over and let her introduce herself in her own words. But,
all right.
You know, she is a mother. She's about to birth another human being, and at the same time building this business. So I love to interview strong women going out there. So you know, you don't need to actually be on the right track. There's no such thing as the right thing to do on the entrepreneurial journey. You can do anything basically, and once you make your mind to it. And in fact, you know, as a mother, as a woman about to enter another new exciting journey, it makes the mind stronger. Would you agree? It makes the mind stronger, so that you can achieve what you want to do. So without further ado, let me introduce Jenev.
All right. Well, thank you, Elise, so much for having me. I just love your work, and I'm so excited to be speaking with you today, and just so grateful for this opportunity to share a little bit about what I do and how business owners can be stronger in love. So thank you for having me.
Welcome, welcome. So I know you are a doctor. She's a doctor, but don't be scared. She's the nicest doctor I've ever met. And why don't you share with us your journey? I mean, like you have a degree in clinical psychology. So what's this passion with entrepreneurs, especially women? Why did you decide to do what you do? What's your big why?
So, I mean, I'll back up. So I originally went to graduate school for psychology because I've always been obsessed with people reaching their potential and peak performance and things like that. And I really, you know, learned a lot more about mental illness, and all of that was also very interesting to me as well. But I found that a lot of what was taught was from a very Western objectivist kind of medical model. Here's what's wrong with you. Here's how bad your mother messed you up. Here's how, you know, pathological you are. And that's sort of what I kind of got involved with for my graduate career. I was still, you know, I had learned a little bit more about more positive approaches to working with people, more strength-based, solution-focused ways of helping people and helping them reach their potential. But it wasn't until after I graduated and became a licensed psychologist that I came upon what I think is a revolutionary form of working with couples that impacts people basically across the board in their lives. So I can speak a little bit about that because that's actually a real big foundation of my work, and I can speak about how it applies to entrepreneurs and how I also got interested in working with entrepreneurs as well.
Sure. Go ahead.
So my psychologist hero, mentor, Dr. Sue Johnson, is a psychologist out of Canada who basically has been studying human relationships for the past 20 to 30 years. And what she's found, and this is really important information, is that we are so much more connected than we pay attention to. And she really kind of cracked the code of love, right? So you read about love and you hear about how it's a mystery and how it's, you know, this, she says, you know, you fall in love, it's something that happens to you, you get hit over the head with it, it's shrouded in mystery, there's all kinds of tragedy around it, but this woman has basically figured out how love works, what love's about, and has created a method of working with couples that can bring them together and really cause them to create, deep intimacy and real connections. And it's all about a real strong emotional bond. So anyway, this work is just revolutionary. It's about the really resiliency of humans. It's not about how screwed up everyone is, but how we're wired for love and how we all grow toward love. So anyway, it's like I got this training, and my whole world opened up, because I had these keys to really help people in a big way in terms of how to repair their relationships, but that really extends across the board. So in terms of people reaching their peak potential and all that, it really does come a lot down to how strong their relationships are. Mm-hmm. And so, over the years, I've also been, again, interested in potential and all of that, and creativity, and I wound up signing up for Marie Forleo's B School back in 2012, because I wanted to do more with my own private practice. I had been in practice for a few years, but I wanted to get more creative with it. And so I was surrounded by all these cool women entrepreneurs, and I was like, wow, like you can do that and this, and like, creativity, and it was just so much more interesting to me. So as I became more interested in business and my own practice development, I met a ton of cool women who happened to be growing really amazing businesses that were changing the world. And so I found myself becoming more aligned with them than, say, your traditional therapist, psychologist, bound by certain rules, and I wanted to have a more global reach. So I've since transitioned to coaching entrepreneurial women in particular. So that's my long-winded spiel to answer your question. I hope that's helpful.
So I do get it. I mean, in my own journey, when I was struggling and then suddenly I became so successful, it strained. There was a strain with me and my husband. Suddenly I decided that, hey, I'm better, he's not good enough, and then there was this whole strained relationship. I'm not shy to say this. I mean, it does really happen, and I wanted to leave because I felt like I deserved more. So there was this entire new territory, new area that I've never ventured into, because both of us were coming into relationship at the same level of frequency, and then I kind of like moved up, and then he's struggling to move up, and so of course now we are working things out. I've kind of like grow as well and understand that. So I do get that, like a lot of women, it's just part and parcel of their journey. And so the next question would be, why is having a good relationship important in your entrepreneur journey, since we are in the topic of entrepreneur? So why is that important?
Yeah. So I'll just make an overall general statement that having a strong relationship is important for all aspects of our lives. I mean, they've done all kinds of research about the health benefits, about, they did a study about young career women and young professional women. They were more successful in their careers when they had stronger relationships. But I think it's particularly important for entrepreneurship, because what a strong relationship really does is it kind of provides a safe haven from the rest of what can be a cruel and unforgiving world at times. And so when we have that backup, when we have that support, when we have, safe arms that we can fall into at the end of a difficult day, it just helps us be so much more strong in everything that we do. And this is where society kind of misses the boat, because, there's a lot, at least, I mean, I'm in the U.S., you're not, so it's probably quite different, particularly that it's not a Western culture necessarily, but in the U.S., in many, Western cultures, it's all about independence and autonomy and all that, and we wind up denying our needs for that secure connection, that secure relationship. But when we have that support, we are actually that much more able to be more independent. So, I mean, I can speak about some interesting research if that's something that you'd like me to talk about, just about how a healthy relationship actually changes your brain.
Sure. But can I back up for a while? You said something about the support. So, like, in my own situation, like, I started becoming a man.
Yes.
Because from that feminine side, I was a very needy woman. I thought the man must protect me. Money comes from the man. I was this needy woman. And then suddenly I was thrown into this success. I suddenly became, I had to think like a man. I acted like a man. I thought I didn't need the man. And then that's where, like, I don't need the man to change the light bulb for me. And I sort of like figured, and then eventually I thought like I'm totally denying the support from the masculine side. Like I try to do it all by myself,
Totally.
right? So do you see that commonality in the women entrepreneurs who are just growing? Like suddenly they just decided, hey, I think I'm the man, and I just need to behave like the man, and they lose their feminine side, and then that's when they crumble, right? And so
Absolutely.
when I started to remember, like, hey, I'm actually a woman. I'm not a man. So
Right.
I need to allow that support from my husband and be a woman. And then that's when my business kind of like took off to another level. So do
Wow.
you feel like women sometimes deny that support from the men, and that's why the relationship fails?
I don't know if that's singularly the reason why a relationship would fail, but it happens all the time. And look, I mean, you and I, entrepreneurs, women, people who set off to create their own businesses, we're strong women, right? We're strong, independent women. There's no doubt about that, and that's awesome.
So what kind of men actually need to like support women? Like that's definitely not the weak, right?
Right, absolutely, right, absolutely, right. But we're strong, independent women who can get things done, and it's so interesting because I've seen that many of these entrepreneurial women that I've worked with basically shut down their needs, and people across the board do that, I believe, and this is why relationships are failing, with the divorce rates as they are, but it's even worse in entrepreneurial circles. So by all means, I don't think that you're alone. I mean, having a business requires a lot of masculine energy. It requires a lot of, go-gettedness and action taking and all of that. But it becomes a problem when that's all we're doing and we're shutting our partners out, which happens a lot. Women go on these journeys and they say the best, seminar on personal growth is starting your own business and all of that, and like you were saying, you had this higher vibration and you were suddenly growing and expanding in different ways, and your man's like kind of left behind in a way, and it happens gradually for the woman, but to her dude, it's like all of a sudden she's this new person and you're in a different place, right? And it's like the problem is that people don't stay connected along the way.
Yep.
So, I mean, to answer your question, absolutely, it's totally common, and everything. I mean, I think
Any messages, any tips for the men out there who are married to a strong woman or plans to date a strong woman? How are they going to survive the ride?
well, I think it actually it's a good question, but I think it's about you know I think it has to start if the woman is really the go-getter and the dreamer and the person who's like pushing things along. It really has to start with her to let him into her experience and to let him know what's going on and to stay connected, right? So I think for both partners, my advice is always to stay emotionally open with each other, to stay accessible to each other, to stay responsive to each other, to keep your relationship and your connection a priority. So all this research that's been happening, it basically shows that what a strong relationship is a secure and safe emotional bond. So what that means is you have to be emotionally available to each other. You have to be present with each other. Yeah, it starts with yourself, right? You have to be able to be attuned to your own emotions so you can openly express them to your partner. What happens all the time is that, and I see this especially with women entrepreneurs, we all have one of two tendencies well, there are some variations as well, but when we're in distressed relationships, and this is interesting, some of us kind of turn the volume up and get loud and critical and pursue and say, why didn't you do this? Right? And this is kind of the classic classic female role that we see.
I know. The mom that we don't want to be.
That's what we see, right? And then there's the dude who's just like, whatever, like totally cold, shut down, turned off, tuned out, right? Withdrawing, just miles away. And the more he withdraws, the more she ramps things up and the more critical she gets. And it becomes this really vicious cycle. But what I found working with entrepreneurs is that, and my background is actually doing a lot of couples therapy with non-entrepreneurial couples. So it's been an interesting comparison for me. What I found with a lot of women entrepreneurs is that their coping strategies tend to be more traditionally masculine. So they'll shut things down, they'll avoid, they'll pull away, they'll throw themselves into their work. They won't tell their partners about, the latest expensive coach that they've hired, for example. So it's just interesting to see the contrast, because when you brought up how, you became the man, it's almost even the coping styles of the female entrepreneur is quite similar to the traditional masculine kind of role. And again, these are not hard and fast rules. I'm making broad generalizations, but that's kind of how it goes.
Okay. Awesome. So before we go on the research, what you talked about the support, the openness, and the communication. So basically, on the flip side, this is exactly what the relationship is failing because of not willing to communicate, not being emotionally available. That's so important. Let's talk more about being emotionally available, what that really means, because I know a lot of couples, they have this warped idea about being in love, right? And then suddenly that honeymoon period fizzles off, and then like, oh my God, this is the real deal. And then they suddenly, like you say, they withdraw, they back off, and then that's when the communication part disappears.
Totally. Yeah. So what happens is these vicious cycles start up, right, where people are disconnected from each other, and it starts with ourselves, right? So to really foster that true emotional connection, that emotional accessibility and that openness, we've got to really be aware of what's going on for ourselves. And so sorry?
So do you think people, the women, men, they don't communicate as openly? The reason is because they don't even know who they are? Or is there a fear of judgment from the husband, the wife? Why is communication so hard?
Right, and I think a lot of it has to do with the way that we cope with our own emotions, right? And so emotion is kind of a dirty word in many ways. Emotions are irrational, you shouldn't trust your emotions, they're so primal. All of that is BS, actually. Emotions are what Sue Johnson calls the music of the dance in a relationship. They're these ancient biological signals that tell us what we need to do. They are so important, but we've all gotten, very bad at listening to our own emotions. Not all of us, but many of us, right? So from growing up in families where emotions weren't expressed or acknowledged or allowed, to growing up in cultures where, you kind of get, it's all about the thoughts and cognition is king and all that. People get out of touch with their emotions. And when you say, Elise, is it because people don't know who they are? On some level, our emotional experience is who we are, right? And it changes and it moves, and if we pay attention and accept and are just aware of our emotions, they're going to shift and change and move, right? So I think the main problem is that so many of us short circuit out of our true primary emotional experience in love because it is raw, because it is vulnerable, because it is painful, because it is scary, right? When we can't reach our partner, like our brains literally go into a primal panic mode. And so many of us don't know what to do with that. And so what happens is we either get critical and hostile and kind of short circuit into anger, which feels a lot safer, right? Or other people will kind of turn things all the way down and short circuit into kind of like shutting it off, numbing it out, like it's just too overwhelming, whatever, I don't care, it doesn't matter to me, and just kind of cut it off. And so, yeah.
So when the relationship fails, what really happens? Is it because the love is lost? If the communication fails?
So, yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's a different answer for every couple, obviously, right? But, some people aren't, they do fall out of love. Some people, sometimes people do outgrow each other, right? Sometimes a woman, what she accepts in a relationship, 1 year, she does a lot of personal growth and suddenly is in a different place, and her man doesn't treat her the way she wants to. She's in a different place the following year. I mean, those are all totally valid reasons why why relationships fall apart. But what's so sad is that so frequently the relationships become on the rocks and fall apart because of this emotional miss that happens, right?
Right.
And so what happens is when you know, if I'm in a relationship and my partner is, if I'm the woman entrepreneur who avoids and shuts down and acts like it doesn't matter, and my partner's screaming and raging at me, right? What's happening underneath for him, and this doesn't necessarily happen, but you know, just as an example, what's happening underneath for him is that he's really scared, right? Like he's really scared that I'm out of here, that I'm somewhere else because I'm shut down. He gets the message that, you know, I don't care, when what's happening for me is like there's so much going on that I can't even express it. So what people really need to do is just like really slow down and get in touch with what's really happening. Because underneath that emotional withdrawal and underneath that, you know, fireworks display of criticism and hostility, there's always something softer, something more vulnerable, something more raw that would more likely draw your partner closer to you.
So do you think like the way men and women communicate, they are different? So men communicate in a certain way. He expresses his he expresses his emotions in a certain way, and a woman does a different way approach. So how do you like bridge that communication gap during your sessions with the couples?
That's a really good question. And I look at it more about the style, the coping mechanism that people use. So again, men traditionally are less verbal about their emotions. I mean, just in terms of being raised to be tough and strong, and you know, they're taught there's really no room for men to kind of have softer, more raw, more vulnerable emotions, right? It's really something that gets beaten out of many of our men. And so as a result, I see more men that do avoid, withdraw, and shut them down. But the way that my work, or it's not mine, I mean, it's a form of, it's called emotionally focused couples therapy that informs my practice. But the way that it works is that we really slow things down. And we really have a heart-to-heart conversation about what's going on. And it can be really, really difficult for some people, and men especially, to kind of go underneath the shut down surface and actually talk about what's happening for them on an emotional, experiential level, because many of them have never done that before, right? So that might mean I will ask them, you know, if there's something in their body, like a tightness in their chest, you know, really getting into the visceral experience of it, because our emotions live in our bodies. And so when we get when we peel away the layers of the onion and we get closer to the true kind of primary emotions that people are experiencing, and they can express that to each other, what usually turns out happening is that partners recognize that they're so much more important to each other than they've ever given themselves credit for. Mm-hmm. And it can be like deeply moving, and people are like, I didn't know you felt that way. Like, what? Because everyone thinks they're mind readers, and you know, so when you really slow things down and people are able to actually express themselves with each other, it's just it's wild how little the other person.
So what came up for me, that's assume, making an ass out of you and me, right? So
totally.
They mind read a lot, I assume. And I was reading this book, I think it's The Men from Mars, and yeah, in one of the chapters, I think it's there, I'm not sure, but I read like a couple is driving, and then the guy goes really quiet, and then the woman is like, oh my god, he's gonna ask for a breakup, and oh my god, what did I do wrong, blah 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 blah. And then in the man's mind, the guy's mind is like thinking, oh my god, I'm due for the checkup for my car, and I haven't done it, with a car breakdown, and so on. And then there was this just silent moment, but they were just thinking of different things, and then the woman assumes a lot. Do you think a woman assumes a lot?
I think both partners do. Absolutely. 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 I mean, typically, without that emotional, without that transparency, that, you know, I mean, we need to hear from our partners all the time how much we're appreciated and loved. We need that. There's nothing wrong. That doesn't make us clingy or, you know, codependent or anything like that. It's part of it's something that can create a healthy relationship to kind of reinforce those messages with each other. By all means. And sorry, keep going.
So typically, clearly, the couples that come to you, they have cracks in their relationship, right? So when is the point where you decide, hey, maybe it's time for you, or do you, like tell them, or this never happened, like maybe it's time for you to like chill and separate for a while, or maybe divorce is the result. So are you attached to the word divorce, or what usually is the outcome? Do you want to gel them back together?
Well, couples and individuals come to me typically, I might want to meet with a woman who's not sure, and we can talk about that. But when I see a couple, they both have the intention of repairing their marriage. So that's important. If one person doesn't want to repair their marriage and the other person does, it's not going to work. So both have to have, and sometimes people are on the fence, sometimes people are feeling very hopeless, sometimes people are like, I don't know if I can do this, I'm going to try. It's often a last-ditch effort. And so more often than not, couples do get to the place of creating a much stronger relationship.
So what if, like, okay, so you mentioned that the couple themselves must be ready to want to patch things up. So what happens is, this happens all the time. Like, the husband wants it, but the wife doesn't want it, or the wife wants it, the husband doesn't want it. So what would you do then?
Yeah, that's a good question. If one partner is interested in working on the relationship and making it better, by all means, there is room to work with that, because there are things that somebody can do differently in terms of how they show up in the relationship to make changes. That being said, if there's somebody who's just like totally stubborn and isn't going to change and has no interest in having a better relationship, well, that makes it really difficult to work with the couple, because if someone is like stuck in wherever they are and they're not willing to change or look at anything or have no interest in it, then that's a situation where a couple might wind up separating.
So in your work, do you need to do a little bit of a therapy work first before the coaching? Because this is really emotional, and we've mentioned about, this is really raw. And sometimes we are not able to coach the person through it until he or she, it's healed, so to speak, right? And he's willing to look within, and he's balanced in that way and more mature and willing to look inside. So do you have to do some kind of therapy work? Do you believe in therapy versus like coaching? What are your thoughts?
I absolutely believe in therapy, and if somebody were to have a significant mental illness or any kind of suicidality, or if there's anything like depression or anything that's tied up in this, which there often can be, that definitely calls for therapy. I find that with entrepreneurial couples that I've worked with, they're able to go deep in a coaching setting without, falling apart, without needing to go to a hospital, anything like that. It's actually more empowering. People have found, because it's almost like connecting them to more of themselves. So it's the kind of couples work that I do is definitely informed by my experience as an emotionally focused therapist, like no doubt about that. But if there are no if somebody, say, is healthy and really wants to work on their relationship and has no other underlying mental, diagnoses or anything like that, then they're appropriate for coaching. But by all means, I'm a very big believer in therapy, and I love it.
In therapy, like in coaching therapy, we have this. It's always mentioned that you see the person as he or she's not broken, they are really perfect. But sometimes this person is mental. He obviously has depression. So how are you able to like convince yourself that this is just fine? It's just there's a soul. There's a soul. What do you call the journey with this? So how do you like cope with this? Obviously in the mind we're taught like, hey, he's perfect, it's all in good time, and yet you see this person struggling.
Well, if somebody is like clinically depressed, then they need treatment. So they need psychological treatment. I think that they can benefit from talk therapy. They can benefit from medication at sometimes. So I guess I would not see somebody in that situation in my coaching practice. Now, I've certainly worked with countless people who are depressed as a therapist, so You know, it's really about being present with somebody and, you know, looking at, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to work with somebody who's depressed, and it depends on how comfortable the client is with the different kinds of treatment. And, I mean, I could go on about that, but I don't know if that's what, am I answering your question? I'm not really sure what the question is.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's just like when we think about therapy, the person is broken. He needs to be healed,
I
right?
don't look at people that way. Yeah, I mean, if somebody has, I mean, depression is you know, it's a biological condition that's, you know, it's like a, it's difficult, right? I mean, it's something that certainly people need to heal from, but I don't necessarily see somebody as broken if they have depression, you
Mm.
know.
Who
Um,
do you think it's easier to work with, the normal couples or the entrepreneurial couples?
oh, you know, it's hard to say. I think that, you know, couples are as different as, you know, whether they're entrepreneurial or regular normal couples. You
When
know,
emotions are involved, it's like they become very irrational, right?
because they become irrational.
When
Yeah,
emotions are involved, whether or not they're like this high flying, high achieving woman or man, when it comes to emotions, they behave like kids sometimes. They become
yeah, and that's the beauty of it, because what we do is we slow things down and we go to that emotional place and we follow the emotions, and it's actually a beautiful process because it gives somebody the opportunity to like slow down and be with themselves, and that way they can be with each other.
true. So there's another topic I want to talk about. It's a huge thing. It's about money conversation.
Ah, okay.
In in a relationship, like you said, you've got to spend on coaching and this kind of stuff, and then we've got to put food on the table, and then with the kids, so that could cause a strain in the relationship, right? I think money, it's not the cause all the time, but it's one of like the major causes.
Yeah, and I think that most financial issues are the number one cited reason of why people get divorced.
Mhm.
But it's never about the money. It's never about whatever couples think it's about. It's about, unless it's, you know, I mean, I won't say never, right? I mean, if more
It's a
often than
deeper
not,
issue. It's not really about the money, but it's a deeper issue. But they just use money as an excuse.
yeah, pretty much. It's really, I mean, and again, sometimes if two couples get married and they realize, you know what, money is more important to me than you or whatever, I mean, that's a different ballgame. But more often than not, the majority of couples that break apart over quote unquote financial issues, it's not necessarily because of the financial issues, but how they're managing them, right? And so the bottom line is that a healthy, strong, functional, and you know, a great relationship is again built on that emotional connection. It's built on this idea that your partner's going to be there for you, that you know that you can trust that he's got your back, that you're important to him, that you're valuable, and it goes both ways, right? And so sometimes when money or any,
So what you talk about that connection? What if that connection is lost? And then
yes,
some women like, I know it's gone, but I don't want to leave. And with that, it's just a comfort zone.
yeah, you know, I mean, it gets lost a lot, but the good news is that it's also quite recoverable.
Mm.
And so there's something about love that keeps people hanging on, right? And it's a comfort zone in a way, but it's also a hope. It's also what was. It's also there's something that's still there. Like, you know, I've seen couples in the most like just like hateful, angry places, and yet they're there to do the work. It's because it's because of hurts, it's because of, you know, trauma that's happened, it's because of so many things, but there's still always, not always, but when they come and do the work, there's still a small part of them that believes in that connection, right? And so even when that gets lost, it can be rebuilt. Not always. Sometimes people check out and they're like, I'm done. But when there's still a grain of hope, when there's still a little bit of an effort, even the smallest amount of effort to want to try, it opens up a whole room full of possibilities. So,
So it depends on the situation. So like, okay, so let's take my situation for example, right? when you're so clouded by your emotions, you can't really think straight. You're like, okay, divorce is the way out. I want something better. But yet at the flip side, you have kids and then you have so many things going on. So if someone would be like, say, what was in my situation, and I think there are plenty of women out there, they stay for the sake of staying. They
Yes.
stay because,
See,
yeah, because they feel like a part of them will be taken away, or if they're not financially stable. And so there's so many things going on with a woman. So what would you say to them? Like if they're really going through something like that. Okay, let's generalize it. They may be entrepreneurial, they may be not, but because like we said, when you become emotional, you become irrational, right? So if you are thinking of you just staying for the sake of staying, how do you know I'm staying for the sake of staying, or there's actually a grain of hope, like what you said?
yeah, well, I think it's obviously a very personal decision and a personal not decision, but a place that somebody's going to be in, and so there's no cut and dry answer. How do you know? But when you do kind of strip the layers down and really look into your heart and kind of find, like, is it shut down, is it gone, like I use the analogy, has the train left the station, like, are you really, is there any percentage of you that has feelings for this person, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's any percentage of you that has feelings for this person, well, what are all the layers about around you, right? What's really on the inside, what's in the core, what do you really desire, right?
Well,
And so
I think when you're at that situation, you can't really emotionalize it. So your best bet is to contact Jenev, mybedrelationship.com, and have a chat with her because I know how that feels like. That goes back to being an entrepreneur woman. We deny support, right? We think
yeah.
you could do it all by yourself. You think you could figure it out by yourself. But when it comes to relationships, it really sabotages your business. Like I know consciously now. Like I at that point, I think I also know consciously that because I wasn't vibrating at that level, it's gonna sabotage my business.
Hmm.
So it's so important.
It really is. I mean, when we're not, I mean, it's said that sometimes it's worse to be in a distressful relationship than it is to be single.
Right? An unhealthy relationship is bad for business.
It's true. It's true. I mean, it drains us on all levels. It's physiologically taxing. It affects our brains. So it's really important. I think many entrepreneurial women that I found, might look away from it, might say, "Oh, I'm just going to deal with it myself." They wind up shutting their partners out. The problem gets worse. If people would be willing to kind of look inward a little bit and try to make that connection, it takes a lot of risk, right? You're putting yourself on the line. You assume he just doesn't care. He's out to lunch, whatever, right? But to take that risk of saying, "Hey, I'm really worried about us," right? "Hey, I really care about you and our relationship, and I feel like there's a problem here." That can be really difficult for a lot of people to do, especially I find entrepreneurial women, right, who are just as soon going to like shut that out and like work on their newsletter, right?
So
So,
tell us more about your relationship with your husband. Has it
okay.
been easy? Um, you know, how is he taking your entrepreneurial journey?
He's great. I will say it's interesting because it's his mother that spoke about how many couples there's like a dreamer and then the practical one, right? So I really learned that from his mother, who's a lot like me and who's kind of like a bit of a dreamer, and her husband was more of a practical one, and my man is totally a practical dude, totally your guy's guy, whatever. But it's funny because I got engaged around the time I learned about this stuff, and if I hadn't learned about this stuff, I can totally see myself being like swallowed up by my work, which I still have the tendency to do sometimes, I will admit, totally avoiding anything like emotional or touchy-feely. I'm a very intellectual, kind of cognitive person, which I think is one reason why I can do this work and understand people who do kind of stay up in their heads a lot, because I've worked really hard to
Does
go
that
deep.
mean mind chatter?
What's that?
Does that mean mind chatter? I think
I, I, don't, I don't know if it means mind chatter per se, but I really have to consciously tap into the emotional place to go there myself. And it's automatic when I work for couples because that's just the nature of the work. But in my day-to-day life, I'm much more thinking and rational and, that kind of thing.
But it's interesting that you say you tap into the emotions. The tap into is a very spiritual word. And yet you're doing the psychological work.
It's not, yeah, but it's much more. I mean, it's not. I mean, psychological work. It's much different than that. It's really about just being. I mean, I've heard that the greatest spiritual practice out there is just being present, right? And that's what this work is about. Bottom line.
So there isn't really about spiritual, about the psychology is just a term, but really is to just stay focused and be true to yourself, right? That's the work. That's the work, right?
That's the work, yeah. And sometimes we need help with that because there's so many layers of protection that we build up around that, and it's not only just being true to yourself and being present with yourself, but it's really being able to take risks and show that to your partner.
So the next one I want to talk about, actually, sorry, it's about the research that you talked about, like the benefits of having good relationships. There you go. Why having good relationships will help you make more money and get more clients.
Yeah.
It would want to spur you and encourage you to actually work towards it and not avoid it. So I know you shared with me about there's so many benefits about the brain, about this, and I'm like, oh, okay. So why don't you tell us the scientific side of it that is proven?
Sure. Yeah, and this is really, I mean, I think this stuff is super revolutionary. It's something that was speculated about years ago in circles, small circles, but now that we have technology like the fMRI machine that you can see into the human brain, they're actually able to kind of show that this stuff is real. So I'll give you one study that I just think is so fascinating that my mentor Sue Johnson did with a neurologist James Cohn. Basically, they took married women in distressed relationships, and they put them in an MRI machine so they could look into the woman's brain, and they told the women, you're going to see a little X on the screen, and when you see the X on the screen, you're going to get a shock on your foot, right?
You're going to get a shock on your foot.
You're going to get a little shock on your foot. Yep, it's going to hurt. Okay. Right? So they tell these women about this, that this is going to happen, and they look at their brain, and their brain lights up in fear. Yeah, right? I mean, nobody wants to see a shock nobody wants to get a shock on their foot. Right. They see the X, their brain kind of goes berserk. All right, cool. Then they get the shock on their foot, and their brain understandably registers some pain. Now, obviously, they're not doing anything, unethical. It's not, it's not like the Milgram experiments where they, do terrible things, whatever. But it's a shock. It's painful. All right, so that's the first part of this study. Then they have the women hold hands of a stranger. They go into this MRI machine, and now they're holding somebody's hand, somebody who they don't.
Is the group of distressed married women?
Yes, these are women in distressed marriages.
Okay. Is there a particular reason why they chose these women? Because
yes,
psychologist, I don't know. I'm just curious.
Well, yeah, they chose women in distressed marriages because they wanted to look at what happens when they hold their husband's hands before and after doing, improving their relationships.
Okay.
So anyway, but it's just interesting. They hold the hand of a stranger. They see the X on the screen, and guess what? They're not as scared. I mean, they're a little bit less scared. I mean, they're still scared, but their brain doesn't light up quite as much. The same thing happens with pain. Their brain doesn't light up quite as much. So having that comfort of just anybody, a human, to hold hands, it actually has an effect on how our brain responds to fear and stress. A little one. Okay. Then they hold the hands of their partners, these men that they're distressfully married to. And it makes no difference. Their brains go berserk. It doesn't provide comfort. It's like they might as well have no hand at all to hold. All right, so that's phase one. Then they go through, 12 to 20 or whatever, I don't know. They go through a course of this emotionally focused kind of work with their partners on before and after surveys. They said their marriage is better, they feel better, all that. So now they're theoretically in healthier relationships. They repeat the study. The same thing happens when they're by themselves. The same things happen with the stranger. But now they're in this relationship that's improved, strengthened. They have a stronger emotional connection. They hold the hands of their partners. And when they show the little X on the screen, their brain isn't really that scared anymore. It's a dramatically significant difference. And when the shock happens on their foot, they say, that was a little uncomfortable, right? And their brain doesn't light up in the crazy way that it did before. So what this shows is that when we are in safe and secure partnerships, when we are in healthier relationships, just knowing that our partner's there, holding their hand, whatever it is, it has a dramatic effect on how our brain literally responds to fear and pain, which I think is completely relevant to being in business, because what are we doing all the time as business owners? We're taking risks. We're putting ourselves out there. We're, sometimes knocked on the ground, right? It sometimes can be painful and scary. So we are that much stronger when we are in healthy partnerships.
Something that pops up with in my mind. It's about being in the comfort zone, the fear of the unknown.
Yes.
So even though you are in a relationship, or even though you're holding your husband's hand, you know him, but there is still this fear of the unknown. What will happen? What are the next steps? Even though it's a very sort of like a secured relationship.
Mm-hmm. And when you say fear of the unknown, you mean with the relationship or with the business?
With everything, like in a relationship, because although you know you're in a relationship, you're stressed, but you don't know what the next steps are. You don't know what tomorrow will happen. Is it divorce or not? You don't know, right? Same thing with the entrepreneur journey. You just mentioned about the taking risks, getting outside the comfort zone, and so on and so forth. It's also the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with people who are in secure and strong relationships, they're not scared, though. With
So fundamentally, what I'm getting out of this is basically to help you get over the fear and be more comfortable and confident to overcome life, basically. So when you are secured,
yes,
you feel again, it's back to support.
Yes.
You feel supported.
Yes.
You know you're in a safe place. Nobody's going to judge you. Your husband's going to be there. Versus your husband's not there, nothing is there, and then you're trying to work this out, and then it just goes crazy.
Totally. Right. And it really all goes back to research that was done in the 50s around children and having safe and secure relationships with their caregivers, right? So when a kid knows that their mom's going to be there or whatever, they feel more secure to go out there in the world and to kind of be more independent. Yeah. And this was kind of frowned upon for many years. It was work that was done by a psychologist, John Bowlby, that, was poo-pooed back in the day, but now it's accepted as kind of just the way it is. Mm-hmm. And we're at this other level now where that's the same thing with romantic relationships. It's not widely accepted just yet, but we're on the brink of this revolution where people are recognizing, actually, yeah, we do need each other in the same way that kids need, safe and secure relationships with adults.
I mean, since you touched on kids and we're both mothers, and do you feel like if we have crazy relationships with our husbands, it affects our children?
Oh, by all means. I mean, we learn as kids how to be in relationships through our parents, right? And not only through their relationships, but how we're interacted with as well. But if we see, if what's modeled to us, which is often the case, an emotionally disconnected connection between two adults, we don't really have a model of how love is supposed to work. We don't really know what that's supposed to look like. And so it not only impacts kids in terms of just their overall development and all that, but in terms of how they're going to be in relationships as they get older as well.
So as we talked about the children being, they model after us, so it's not healthy okay, how should I word this? So it's not good just to stay for the sake of staying, because then the kids are modeling after us and you're denying your rights, your desires. Right?
Yeah, I think that, they've done a lot of research on this. And, divorce is definitely traumatic to kids. There's no doubt about it. But two partners in a distressed and angry and hot, in a bad relationship with each other is not any good for them either. So it really depends on where the couple's at in terms of, how they're parenting, how they're, what that's about, So.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so many reasons why one needs to work on their relationship, but at the end of the day, Would you agree, like it's basically your relationship with yourself, self-love? Get to know more about you. What do you have? Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, no, I don't really, it's not so much about, I mean, obviously there's a place for self-love. We're not going to get love unless, as adults, unless we know how to love ourselves to a certain extent. But, one of the things that's really part of this revolution and part of this movement is the acknowledgement that we can't love ourselves until we're loved. So that doesn't necessarily mean, we absolutely need to be loved by this particular person, but it means at some point in our lives we need love. We need to know what love feels like. We need to know what it feels like to be loved, and only then can we really, know what love is. We learn that in relationships with each other. So the whole point of this work and like the kind of foundation of it all is just our ultimate interdependence on each other as humans. We're social mammals. We need each other. It's okay to acknowledge that we need to be loved. So I think certainly self-love, there's a place for it, but it doesn't start there. I think that many of the messages that we get assume that this self-love thing happens in a vacuum when it really doesn't. When we can only learn how to love ourselves by being loved in the first place.
I think it's a parallel journey, right? We learn how others treat us, and then we say, okay, this is not how I want to be treated, and then you just bump it up, and then it's a parallel journey actually.
Yes.
I mean,
Absolutely.
if you love yourself so much, then why are you denying love?
Yes, right.
But still, like it's like the fundamental of it is you got to know what you want. So it's a parallel journey, I find. So when women says, I don't want to date so much, I want to date more. It's not about dating. It's about the journey to discover who you are, and then you can then claim what you want in life.
Yes.
So it's more like a parallel journey, I feel.
Absolutely. I love how you put it that way. And I think that it is a parallel journey, and what's missed a lot is the point of how relationships actually and experiences actually our brains are plastic. They change over our lifetimes. We are molded based on our relationships, and then it's totally a parallel journey because then we again can separate ourselves and can say, okay, this works, this doesn't, this is how I feel, this is great, this isn't, and then we kind of go in relationship to others again and mold and change and grow in that regard. So it's absolutely a parallel journey.
It's exactly how we should be in our own relationship as well, isn't it? Just because you married 10 years ago and he's like this, he will change and you will change, right? So it's a parallel journey. You discover who you are, and then at the same time how to be the wife and be the mother, and then you have all these other roles, and it's self-discovery.
Right, and we're all changing and growing, and I think that where so many entrepreneurial couples, or at least entrepreneurial women, miss the boat is that they feel like they're going off in this new place and they're leaving their man behind when they just need to stay connected, and he'll probably grow and change along with you. Not in the same way, obviously, but in a way that's needed. More often than not, if you just let those needs be known.
I've learned to just accept he has his own journey. Your journey is not his, and he has no responsibility to build your dreams. So if you want to go buy Ferrari or that Lamborghini, it's your decision, your responsibility, and not his. And that actually eases a lot of tension in the relationship. And I think it's just accepting the fact that he has his own journey, and he
Mm-hmm.
will wake up as and when he decides to. It's not in your time. So when we allow him that space, we allow ourselves that space, and then we stop judging and like try to make him into someone else we're not. And then this is what I feel women do all the time. They try to change their man.
Yes.
It's not gonna work.
Not going to work. You can't change the zebra stripes. Totally. So true.
So, I'm really happy to have this conversation with you. It's really beyond business conversations. There's only so much we can talk about, business, building a list and so on, but it's really beyond that to build a successful business. So where can we find you, my love?
My website is mybestrelationship.com, and you're welcome to check me out there, and I'd be happy to speak with anybody who's interested in talking further. If your relationship is on the rocks, if you feel like you don't know whether to stay or go, if you wanted to speak with me, I'd be more than happy to have a consult with anybody. So you'll see a contact me button, and you can find me through there.
Yep. All right. So, like Jenev said, an unhealthy relationship is bad for business. So if you're wanting to ramp it up level, and you're not, then, looking at relationships is such a good place to start, because as a woman, that really sabotages us. We are not like men. We cannot compartmentalize. We are really emotional, literally made out of water, So, yeah. So go ask for help, go get support, because you really need it. You owe that to yourself, and there's nothing wrong with asking for help. It's not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's a sign of leadership. If you are in a room full of people, and they are and if they're smarter than you, you need to congratulate yourself. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Absolutely.
Right? So I'm so happy to have you. Is there any last messages that you would like to tell us, share with us, any tips, and how we can start the great year with a big bang?
I would love to give a tip. I would love to just, well, one tip is just to really, take care of your relationships, prioritize them, talk to each other, spend time with each other. As a business owner, you might get, tempted to just like dive fully into your business, and you might be doing that, but make time for your partner and appreciate them, and that's so important. But I also wanted to just give a couple resources if people are interested in learning more about this love revolution and more about the research and all the nerdy science that I think is so cool. Read the book Love Sense, The Revolutionary New Science of Romantic Relationships by Dr. Sue Johnson. It's chock full of cool facts and research, like the study that I just spoke about, and it will give you really great concrete tips and take-home messages about how to really kind of increase and strengthen your emotional bond. So I just wanted to put that PSA out there to kind of let people know about that book, because it's really a fantastic book about this whole new science of love, and I think everybody should read it.
Awesome. I love the way you say the whole new science of love. It's not the emotional woo-woo side. So there is a science to love. Be love, stay in love, and spread love.
Yeah, and but it's about emotions. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're about to pop in 2 weeks.
yeah,
Let us
hopefully
know how you manage. And we might have another conversation by then, how to manage 2 kids with men and
You've got 3. Are you kidding me? You're my hero. Please.
Awesome. So thank you so much. We'll keep in contact. Go look for Jenev at mybestrelationship.com, and it's the same URL on Facebook as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I love talking about this stuff and love connecting with you, Elise. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.